I don't know if this is censored, but they get shit done. And like, that's what like I love about women, like, and strong women and Black women. Like we're coming together and we're going to figure this out.
Welcome to Beyond the Lens, presented by Diesel Films. I am Seth Shapiro.
And I'm AJ Speaks.
In this episode, we welcome Jenna Contreras and Lauren Stowell, the dynamic duo behind the groundbreaking WNBA documentary, 144. In just 9 short years, Jenna has rose through the ranks of ESPN to be one of their lead feature producers. Lauren's work has garnered her 5 Emmys, and she is respected as not only one of the finest storytellers at ESPN, but in the entire sports media industry.
You can hear the passion in Lauren's voice as she told us about incorporating Breonna Taylor and Jacob Blake into the 144 documentary. And Jenna took us behind the scenes of some of those emotional moments that would not have been captured if she and her camera crew of 1 had not been ready for the moment. It was also cool to hear how they gave the editor creative freedom to immerse himself in the story and bring them back each scene to watch, one at a time via Zoom. I'm telling you, these are 2 phenomenal women with great stories to share, and it was our pleasure getting to speak with them. Here is Beyond the Lens from Diesel Films.
A very special episode today. We welcome the co-directors of ESPN's unprecedented documentary 144, which gives us an intimate look at life inside the WNBA bubble. Jenna Contreras and Lauren Stowell, welcome to Beyond the Lens.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I got to come in and tell you straight up, May 13th, I'm looking on Twitter, my phone starts blowing up. All of these tweets and everybody's live tweeting about this documentary 144. We'll get into the details of it, but I want both of you just to walk me through that moment. All of your hard work, watching it. Were you watching it? Where were you? Walk us through what was going on at that moment. Jenna, you can start.
Yeah, so many emotions. Excited that it was out and people were receiving it well and resonating. Sad that it was over because Lauren and I have been on this journey for so long. Like, you know, there wasn't a day since July that we didn't talk on the phone for like 2 hours minimum. And just, you know, like really excited. But then every single emotion you could feel, I was feeling it. And I was by myself watching it. Like, I kind of wanted to just like be in my own element and feel all the feels and not have to like explain to someone why I'm crying at a championship, you know, so it was good.
And Lauren, for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a proud moment to see, you know, I don't know, especially just for women's sports and just what it meant, you know, on that platform to see the WNBA, to see these amazing women, you know, on this platform. Like, I watched it with my fiance and one of our neighbors came over and, you know, he's not a huge sports fan, definitely not a WNBA fan. And I was almost like, I know you're probably not going to want to sit through this, but trust me, you know, like it's about more than basketball. And, you know, he was glued to it. And it was really cool to just be able to see it kind of come to life. But like Jenna said, like I had a hard time watching, like, cause I just was frame by frame thinking of everything, like listening to the audio mix and like making sure like the color looked okay. And was anything going to go wrong? Were we going to like cut to black and did the segments come together okay? So it was hard to watch without a technical eye, you know, so but great, really proud moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always tough to kind of watch your own content up on the big screen for the first time. So we like to break this podcast into 3 acts, with the first act being your story. And we could start with Jenna here. Jenna, where did you grow up and when did you fall in love with storytelling?
So I grew up in Southern California, about an hour east of Los Angeles, in a town called Riverside. And it was funny, you know, my parents, I love them, but they still sometimes don't always grasp what I do. You know, like they're like, oh, like, so you're a producer. So like you're behind the camera, like, and you're doing all this. I'm like, okay, like I make all that happen, but you know, like that's my role with it all. But my mom, you know, just was elated with everything going on. And she's like, ever since you were little, you told me that you wanted a job where you can talk and you can meet people. So I think it's always just been innate in me. I just love talking to people, meeting new people, and storytelling is the best vessel for that, right? Like I've come across people I would have never been blessed to if it wasn't for telling their story and getting that opportunity to do that and that trust. So I think it's just talking to people, like learning what makes them them, what makes them unique, what drives them, what have they achieved or overcome to get to where they are for us to be in that moment. Like we were destined to meet in whatever moment. So what made you get here and why are we connected? So I think that just has always been why I've been into storytelling.
Awesome. How about you, Lauren?
Yeah, for me, so I grew up in Connecticut. Actually, I grew up in South Windsor. My dad is a photojournalist. So I kind of grew up from a very early age. Like, my dad had a dark room in the house, and in our basement, I still remember the smell of the chemicals and hanging photos on the line. And it was, black and white photos, but he was a sports journalist, and, he covered UConn sports, and, he did some things for Sports Illustrated and Topps trading cards. So I remember growing up and seeing really like powerful images, and just, I probably before I even remember it, and so it influenced me. I never wanted to be a photographer. That wasn't like my dream when I was a child. But I think that influenced me, and like my dad's kind of passion for sports and just the emotion that a photo can evoke. I started to kind of identify that, I think, at a young age, and I just loved UConn basketball. I'm just going to be honest. Like that was just, I'm sorry. I know you don't want me to, it's just what it was. It helped shape who I am, like I used to have the posters up on my wall and Ray Allen and, Donnie Marshall and all these guys. And I loved it. I would go to the games with my dad, and I'd sit behind his camera bag when I was 8, and like all the guys were like shooting the game, and there I was on the baseline, like cowering behind him, hoping that nobody, runs me over. This is definitely would not fly today, but back in the day, there was no, people just let it go. So yeah, I grew up with that influence, and that's, what led me into journalism and storytelling in sports.
What a great story. A great moment for you to have with your father. There's always been a common thread when we talk to people, and they tend to tell us about a teacher. For you, Lauren, it may be your father, but I want to ask you both this question. Was there a professor, a teacher, or someone who helped you have that breakthrough to like, hey, this is something I really could do as a career? And Lauren, I'll start with you. Maybe if it's your pops, it's your pops, but is there someone else or that person to help get you to, hey, this is actually something that could happen for me?
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit two-part. I think a lot of it was my father and his influence and, just his craft and the passion and kind of his art inspired me. But when I got to college, I was always kind of a more introverted person. I still am that way. Like I like being able to communicate and talk to people, and I love that, but it's hard for me. And it was something that I had to learn. And in college, I had a great mentor. I was working in the sports information department, and the secretary who I worked for, I was working the front desk, answering phones, proofreading media guides, I really had to force myself to talk to people. And that was outside of my comfort zone. And, it was just like the order of things that she taught me, just, her influence of just making sure that, little things like you're on time. And like when you answer the phone, it's good afternoon, Athletic Communications. This is Lauren speaking. There were things that seem small now, but they pulled me out of my shell. And that, I was working basketball games, and I'd had to walk around and, give box scores to the media. And sometimes that would start a conversation, and it would be very uncomfortable for me. I'm like, this is a little out of my comfort zone. But I think those things, just teaching me those little communication skills, are invaluable. I don't know that I would be where I am today without someone forcing me to do the things that didn't feel great, when I was in college. So, yeah.
It's funny. I did sports information at Seton Hall, and it had this similar experience where it allowed me just to break through and do all of those things that I didn't expect and meet people. Jenna, how about for you?
I want to say mine probably came a little bit later. I got a great piece of advice when I first started at ESPN was treat your first 2 years at the company like a master's program. Say yes to everything. Don't close any doors. You may know what you want, but still say yes to everything and meet as many people as you can. And I didn't start in a storytelling role at ESPN. I started in a very technical role, but I knew I wanted to get into storytelling. And so Denny Wolf, who is one of our managers in the feature unit, I just started networking with him. and talking. And, we kind of coined a phrase of like being pleasantly persistent of, if you really want something, you got to put in the time and you got to put the work in for it, and it's not going to be handed to you. And so I think Denny really helped me with, I had to come back a couple of times to his office, and then it was like, is she the real deal? Like, should we invest in her? What is going to happen? And, like putting my money where my mouth is and really doing the work before I got there. And I think that's kind of just taught me now to like be a go-getter. Like, what's the worst thing that someone can say is no. Okay, that's fine. But at least I asked. So I think that was a very valuable lesson in just knowing to like put yourself out there, and, people want to help you if you are genuine and you're interested in it. And also like people kind of respect you a little bit if you're just like, hey, Seth, I want to be on your podcast. Can I do it? And they're like, okay, cool. That didn't happen, but it maybe would have.
Everyone likes some confidence.
Yeah.
Everyone likes a confident person, without a doubt. Speaking of ESPN, you both work there. What was your welcome to ESPN moment? We've heard some different stories. We could start with Lauren, but we've heard, it was the interview process. Was it, messing up your first cut sheet and getting yelled at by talent? So Lauren, what was kind of your welcome to ESPN moment?
That's such a great question. I'm sure everyone has a different story. And I don't know if I've really even thought about it, but you just made me think of, so part of I was in the PA training program. So it's just like the entry level 7-month program, and you get voted on at the end. They don't do it this way anymore, but it was intense. So you get to do everything, prompting and, Sports Center highlights and whatever shows. And so prompting is not glamorous, but it's a wheel, and you're spinning a wheel, and it's kind of counterintuitive because I think you got to spin it forward, and that really makes it go backwards. So it takes a while. Meanwhile, you have talent who's, looking at prompter, and you're going the wrong way. But the biggest thing is making copies. Like, you have to print all the scripts, and you have yellow paper and you have blue paper. And then you have to, when they're speaking, it's yellow. And when they're not, or when they're speaking, it's blue. When it's yellow, they're not, however it was. You have to sort the scripts, and you might only have a minute to do it. Oh my gosh. Like, my third time prompting, we had the biggest printer jam, and there was I didn't know there was no one that's going to help you. Like, you know how printers are, like, you can't, there's nothing you can do. You're like opening all the drawers, and I'm sweating, and, I was running, and I had these like pumps on, and my heel fell off, and I'm going through the newsroom trying to pull the drawers. So I'll leave it at that. I ended up getting at least half of the scripts done. I ran into the studio, and then I ran out during a break to get the other half printed. But hey, it's a learning experience, right? Yeah.
Who were the hosts? We need to know who the hosts were. Who were the hosts?
I think it was Ryan Burr, and I want to say it wasn't like Bill Pito, but they're both gone now. Okay. But I mean, yeah, I do remember it was Ryan Burr, and he was not. I don't think he was very happy about it, but he joked about it. All you can do is laugh, right?
Yeah. So, what are you gonna do?
Gosh, that is like so much like stress and trauma of being a PA and prompting, just flooding back. So another part of the PA process is like after you've done sorting the scripts, games finish when you're on the show, right? And then they're like, we'll send from the newsroom down to the studio printer to then send, if it's like a shot sheet for the highlight, or if it's just like a reader, what you need to do. And, you have like the commercial break to get it to them. And like, it's always never get seen on camera. You do not want to be seen on camera, but you have to like run from your seat of prompting to give it to the talent. And it's always freezing in the studios because you have all these lights on. So like I'm in my massive parka. I have Ugg boots on because it's like the 11 p.m. Sports Center. I'm off of work at 1 a.m. Have this like beanie on that has a massive flower on it. And I'm like running to try to get the shot sheet to Jay Harris. And all of a sudden I hear like they're on air, and I just like stop like deer in the headlights and just duck trying to get behind the desk. Totally didn't. And then just like lift up my hand to try to give him the paper. And then he's like, Jenna's here to drop off a sheet of paper for me. Thank you, Jenna. And then just like took it from me, and I like turned around, like walked away, like tail between my legs. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not supposed to do that. But he was a good sport and just like mentioned me. So I'm like, hey guys, I'm on TV when I'm not supposed to be.
Did the producer have the same reaction, or was he a little upset?
Oh, there was some upset of like, let's not let that happen again.
Yeah.
So my question leads me, or both of your experiences lead me to a question that I want to ask, because I have a mentee that's at ESPN now, and she just started about a year ago, but she's always navigating ESPN, and she's asking me all these questions, and it just seems like it's hard. Like, hey, you want to be in, college football, you want to be in the NBA, you want to do game day. Like, what advice do you guys give to women who are navigating that ESPN, or even just people that aren't at ESPN, to try to break through two questions, the glass ceiling, but also just navigating the prism that is ESPN, if that makes sense?
Great question,
and
AJ.
Jenna, we could start with you.
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel like it's still always evolving, and we're still kind of learning how to do that, right? And especially now that we're all at home, it's much more difficult because it's like you're sending a Zoom invite of like, can we get coffee virtually over Zoom? And like, you're kind of hoping that people will say yes. But I think it's just, one thing, like, if people are interested in features or storytelling, I always tell them, like, find a piece that you really like, find out who produced it and directed it, and then ask them genuine questions of why, of how they executed it or what you like, because we all love to talk about our work, right? It's much easier versus like that cold call. So I try to tell people to make it as personable as possible when they're reaching out, and not being afraid to send like a double email like 2 or 3 weeks later. And, just kind of hoping for the best. Or if, someone that's like, hey, like AJ Speaks told me to reach out to you, wondering if you have quick 5 minutes, trying to make it so there's a little bit of accountability if they know someone. But yeah, it's hard, but you got to put yourself out there. And then, it always comes out to be the best thing that you could do, because no one's going to take control of your career and the care that you're going to put in it than you are. So you just got to bet on yourself.
Lauren, I'll pose that same question to you, or I'll change it a little bit, because both of you have tended to break through that glass ceiling, or trying to break through that ceiling. How have you done that, and what advice do you give people that are trying to follow in your footsteps?
The best advice I could give is to not be afraid to do everything. I think that's really, really important, that there is really no job too small, or when you're first starting out, the importance of the small details. And every person that you meet and that you work with on these various shows, whether it's the graphics producer or the researcher, like, you should treat every one of those people as though they're going to be your boss one day. Like, there's no way that you can ever know. You have to make those relationships. You have to be willing to do and experience everything, even if it's not your forte, it's not your passion. I'm sure Jenna feels the same way. We do a lot of things for many years at ESPN to get a foundation. And at the time, you don't think, like, what is the value of prompting? Well, yes, it will teach you other skills, and you understand how to read a show rundown. You understand how copy, where and what, page in the rundown, or it's E7 is a VO and this is a like, you understand the structure of a show. You understand what the producer is looking for, which helps you make better production decisions when you're actually producing the content. You understand the structure. So that's just like one small example, but I mean, logging things until 2, 3 in the morning, like going through, doing things by hand, keeping very detailed notes, like scheduling, like Jenna said, meeting with people. Like, it all seems very small, but I think that those things build the foundation to go on to these other opportunities. Like, everyone comes in and says they want to be a 30 for 30 producer and direct documentaries. Well, it starts with the knowing how to change the paper in the copy machine when you're prompting. Like, it seems silly, but it starts there. And if you have to, you really do have to start somewhere, and people respect that, and that earns you credibility in the business. And yeah, I think that's hugely important.
I got to add to being authentically yourself. Don't try to be someone that you admire or that you look up to. Like, you can learn from their experiences and learn from their craft and take little parts of it, but finding what works best for you as a storyteller. You are an authentic person. What can you bring to the story that someone else can't through your life experiences? And really leaning into that strength of who you are, because, like Lauren and I talk all the time, like 144 was the way it was because her and I were on it together. It would look completely different if other people were on it.
That's great advice. And Jen, I wanted to ask you, what was your big break at ESPN that took you from PA to producing documentaries and working on some of the bigger projects? What was your big break?
I think it was actually taking a position, a promotion over to ACC Network with ESPN. You know, I was in the feature unit. I was on NFL Countdown. I was doing great stories there and had my mentors and like my tribe, like my people that I knew like were always going to look out for me. But, you know, it's hard to get promoted at ESPN. No one really wants to leave. And so there was an opening, and it was, you know, I cried about taking a promotion, which is so silly now because I'm like, you guys can't keep me. What? I thought you liked me. And they're like, you know, you need to take it. You need to move on to it, and it's going to be good for you. So when I did move to them in 2019, my first assignment was to do a 1-hour documentary on Notre Dame women's basketball. And I was like, okay, you know, the longest content I've done before that was like a 10-minute piece. Like now I get to do a whole show and I get to kind of create what I want. And, you know, like them having that confidence in me with not really even knowing me, just from like the interview process, and then like them taking that bet on me and then also instilling that trust in me was huge. And so I did that one. And then they're like, okay, now do one on Miami women's basketball. And then, you know, so like I'm still within the ESPN family, within the ACC network. And then, you know, came the VP of our feature unit, who I used to work with, Craig Lazarus, was like, hey, there's a bubble documentary. You know, we want you to do it because of your experience with women's basketball. And, you know, long form is something that we all want to do, but sometimes those opportunities more than likely go out of house. So because I had those 2 reps under my belt, it made sense for me to go to the bubble. And so like, I think just, you know, it's so funny how life works out, right? Like I was like crying at my desk, like, I don't want to leave. But then, you know, without those opportunities, I would have never gotten 144, which is essentially like the pinnacle of what my career has been.
That's awesome. And Lauren, how about you? What was your big break?
I would say it probably was, so I was on, during my time as a PA and later as an AP, I was on a NASCAR beat for a long time. I worked on, ESPN had a daily show called NASCAR Now, and I didn't know anything about NASCAR when I first, you know, rotated into the show, and I went to my first race, and that was, you know, the end of it. Like I loved it. I loved, you know, motorsports. I got very heavily involved with it, and I was producing features, you know, and the great thing was there was really nothing off limits with NASCAR teams and drivers because of sponsors. As you know, they're like an open book. They love the camera. They love the publicity. And so we were doing stories, and I was really enjoying that. But I was kind of in a silo. Like, you know, no one really respected NASCAR. Like, you know, it was one of our properties. We had a rights agreement, but it wasn't something that was glamorous that people were lining up to work on our NASCAR, you know, studio and event programming. So I ended up coming across a story during my time at NASCAR and working. We did a lot of Hendrick Motorsports stories. We had, you know, Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, and they had a motorsports engineer who was born without arms, and he worked designing chassis and bodies of cars. And, you know, I knew about him through my time covering NASCAR, but I'm thinking no one had ever done this story. And so I had a really good relationship with, you know, Hendrick Motorsports PR. And, you know, we talked about it, and, you know, I met Richie, and his name was Richie Parker. And, you know, I remember the first time I met him and at Hendrick Motorsports, and, you know, he took me down. You know, he was like, well, I live down the street and we can, you know, sit out and I could show you my house, and I have a car collection. And, you know, he, you know, opened the door for me as a gentleman when I came down. And I was just fascinated. I was like, I cannot believe how inspired I was just by how when we met and we talked, and it was never a disability for him. You know, it was everyone else saw that, but it was just his spirit and his character. And honestly, that piece was my first kind of breakthrough as far as taking a motorsports piece. Like, he was part of that motorsports community that I admired and loved so much, and sharing that with a mainstream audience that didn't see it as a NASCAR piece, but it was, you know, it was accepted, you know, outside of the NASCAR coverage that we did. And, I mean, we were surprised when it got nominated for an Emmy, and I brought Richie and I went to the Emmys together. We were thinking we were just going to have a party and like, just we're so happy to be here. And when it won, it was like, he was there. He was there, and it was an amazing experience. And that was kind of, I think that opened a lot of doors, for me, because I was still an AP at that time. I was, very early in my career. So that was just something that, I look back fondly on.
Amazing. 2014, I was at Lincoln Center that night. I actually also won an Emmy that night.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Humble brag.
Humble brag. Yeah. For NFL media. But I remember you winning that Emmy, and it was special in that piece, Drive. I mean, it was amazing. I think I watched that about 4 or 5 times. It was awesome. So I remember that night. What did that night mean to you to win that first Emmy?
It was surreal. I think just with Richie being there, I think that was what I remember the most. Like, it was just, we took the bus together, like from ESPN. Like, I didn't even drive and have like a plan of like spending the night or something. You don't go into it thinking that. We just, I just remember being on the bus on the way back, sitting in the bus, like sitting with Richie, and, we had the Emmy there. Like, we were just sitting in the bus, just driving back to Bristol. And it was just like this kind of, and I had like McDonald's that night, like I came back at like 11 or midnight, whatever time it was. And I remember having McDonald's with my Emmy and just being like, this is pretty cool. I didn't really understand it at the time. Like, the significance, became much bigger after the fact. But it was an amazing moment. It was such a great night. And I'll remember that always with Richie and, that experience we had together. Very fortunate. So, yeah.
Another great story. I got a question for both of you. You both kind of went from features into long form, or not kind of, you went from features to long form. What's the biggest transition? I'll start with you, Lauren.
I don't know, because I don't know if there was as much of a transition for me, because I think I don't overshoot things by nature, but I think Jenna and I are very similar. So you're going to learn this. Like, but I shoot everything like it's a documentary. If not everything, there are some things that, if it's like a one-day shoot, you're not going to get that content. But if I'm sitting down with you and the person has time, I'm going to definitely, if it's 2 hours, if it's 3 hours, like I've done interviews that have gone 5 hours. I mean, I love talking to people, and, so I feel like that was kind of always my problem, is that there was like too much. And then, you learn to, make your self edit, and what you're but I was always looking to expand, or always trying to make the pitch of, yes, we did this 6-minute piece, but can we expand it to a 30-minute show or a short doc? So I was always kind of looking for that in between, just because I always thought there was like another layer, like, oh, but we didn't get into this, or this character, we only had one bite from them, and they, have this amazing story. And so I don't know, I guess that doesn't really answer your question, but I think the transition was just being able to really lean into that more, and then understanding how to budget that and how to make sure that you are shooting for what you have budget for, and, all of the logistics and nuances to it. But I guess that if that answers your question, I'm not.
It does. And it wasn't a great question. I'm just asking sort of like the challenge of the two, or the transition. So Jenna, I'll ask you the same thing, but you answered it, Lauren. Thank you.
Yeah, Lauren and I are both very long-winded, and we love to talk to people, so we don't have a problem with that. I think it's just probably being a little bit more organized, of knowing that, like, if you're going to be shooting more than a day or two, that, like, giving yourself that ability to not cram everything in, because we're so used to, like, you have like 2 hours with the athlete, and it's like an interview, and it's a specialty shoot, and then it's, some posing or whatever, and just like, giving that ability to breathe, and like, I think letting that happen, and then figuring out what else you could do with it. But I don't know, like, it kind of feels like this is what we're supposed to do. So it kind of feels natural. Like, it just feels like, it's documentaries are amazing, and it's just really fun, and it comes naturally, and it's good, and it's great, and I want more. I don't know.
It's such a cool story to hear, because at one point Lauren tells us that she's an introvert, and now she's like, hey, I love to talk, and then you tell me you don't want to leave your department, but like you are where you're meant to be. So it's funny how all of that comes together.
Yeah,
absolutely. So we're going to enter into the second act of the podcast, and we're going to talk about your groundbreaking film 144, Life Inside the WNBA Bubble. It's truly an emotional roller coaster. How did this doc come together, and how did you both get involved with it?
Go ahead, Lo. I always give it to Lauren. She gets this answer.
I know. It's such a tough, because it's so kind of convoluted, but it is. So really, things happen quickly. I think that's why this is a tough one of how it like came together. There were a lot of forces, but Shanae Agumake, she had been talking with her sister Nneka when Nneka had just gotten to the bubble. And I think just based on their conversations about like how historic this season was going to be, Shanae, with her kind of ability to think as both a player and, an analyst, like for the company, she saw the opportunity, didn't necessarily know exactly how or what it would look like, but the way she described it was, she was going through the Rolodex of like ESPN Films, E60, like who do I call or speak to about this idea that we should get cameras into this bubble. If we're going to do this, like we got to do it now. It needs to happen now. So those were conversations that were happening above Jenna and myself. We were unsuspecting at that time. We didn't know anything about the project. And when those conversations started happening, the conversation of how to staff it, conversations with our team, and they came to us and said, would you like this opportunity? It's going to be, we don't know what the expectations are. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know really. We just know that we need to move quickly. It's going to be a small crew. You're both not going to be able to go. Is this something you're interested in? And then Jenna and I connected, and it was off and running from there.
Yeah, it was like from like us getting assigned to me in quarantine was like a 3-week period. And then from that was just like stealth FBI stalking, researching of every single player in the league, of like their social media, what college do they go to, what team, like what's their role, and just like figuring out, and then just creating so many Google Docs of like what we want to highlight and what we expect to do, and like, trying to figure out what it was. And, also kudos to like the WNBA, because when they agreed to this, they're like, okay, like we want females on this. And also like if like women of color, that's an extra bonus, because I think like just our own experiences kind of can help shape the story of it, and like, representation matters immensely. And, I think there was some comfort in knowing that like behind the lens, there were people that looked like the athletes.
So the doc, that was a nice promo. So the doc didn't come together until they were actually already in the bubble? So we weren't there like tip off. Season tipped off on July 25th. I flew to Bradenton, Florida for my quarantine, of a week quarantine on August 7th. So our first day of shooting wasn't until the 16th of August. Wow, that's crazy. And had you and Lauren worked together before?
No, we hadn't. And it's like the best match made in heaven. Like this was like, if this was an arranged marriage, we would like hit the jackpot with all of it.
Yes. Yeah. It was like instant. Like we knew each other.
Yeah.
And when Jenna had moved on to ACC Network, I didn't really see her as much and we didn't work as closely. But it was like, I think the decision that was made to put us together was the absolute right one. Because there was never a time that we were like, we had the same aesthetic, like the same kind of eye, the things that shots that she liked, or moments, their characters that resonated with her also resonated with me. So like even our idea going into it as we were talking were very much aligned with what we felt strongly about, the things we were passionate about. We would sit for hours and just talk about the project. Even when we didn't need to, we were just like thinking about, constantly thinking about different,
it consumed your life.
It was, right.
Yeah. Like, especially like bi-coastal, like I'd get a text like 2 Lauren's time. She's like, I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, yo, me too. So what should we do? Like, it was just constantly, we could always know that like we could send a text and be like, yep, me too. What do you think?
Well, take us a little bit deeper, because you go in and you're working on this project together, right? So Jenna, you end up going in the bubble. Lauren, you end up staying home. How did that work? Because I know I worked in our own bubble here in Miami, putting together our broadcast for the bubble when the team was there. And one person handled the logistics, which consumed us. And then I handled a lot of the storytelling, which consumed me. How did you guys break that up for yourselves? And how did you make that work?
A lot of balance. Yeah. Lauren on the outside was also probably my support system for everything, just like emotionally, because like it was tough being secluded in this bubble with like the world is literally on fire around you, but you're safe. But then it feels weird because like it's like this fake safe, but then you're still okay. And even in the bubble, we'd continue talking every single day of like, hey, like these are the players that I want to reach out to. Like, let's email this team. Let's figure out this, what we can do. And then, you know, sometimes when I would just be updating Lauren about an interview or what we shot that day, it was just almost like, hey girl, like I just need you to listen to what's going on. I just need to cry for a second because this is some really heavy ish that's going on. And like, I just want you to feel what I just experienced as much as you could. So yeah, like sometimes it was Lauren was more head of the logistics than I was. And then, you know, sometimes she took a storytelling of like her reading as I'm sending her back transcripts and like I hadn't gotten a chance to read some of them. She'd be like, hey, like you should follow up and do this. So it was really just like a tandem at all times of us, you know, balancing of what we needed. And I kind of feel like we always knew what the other person needed somehow. So it just worked well.
Lauren, were you getting a lot of the footage and you mentioned transcripts? Were you taking all that in? What were you doing? What was your role during that whole process?
So, I mean, in a perfect world, that would have been a great workflow. But given literally it was just hitting the ground and like Jenna didn't even have like a day to scout. Like we didn't have a day to get a plan together of like, okay, I'm here. Let's regroup and figure out a workflow. I'm going to ship drives back. And then we didn't even have an editor. Yeah. Like we didn't know what we were doing. I was still making calls to edit houses and trying to figure out budgets and like how much do we have for an editor? How many weeks do we need? We didn't even know how long we were going to be there. Yeah, so God like if this was like a normal, here's our dates, we're going to go in, this is our budget, we have our crew, our editor, we'll have our support staff in place. It was just kind of like finagling and figuring out as we went. And I think that wasn't ideal. Ideally, I would have wanted to support Jenna more with myself going through and screening footage. You know, she was doing that herself with the DP, Josh Smith, like they were going through every night. But, you know, in a perfect world, you'd want to ship those drives out and I should be back in edit and we should start building storylines and segments and like starting to say, okay, here's what we need, more of these shots or some more COVID testing on this day. But Jenna did such a great job of she had great intuition and like knowing she was organized, but also knowing, okay, I know we plan to shoot this practice today. It's on the schedule, but I really feel like I just want to sit down with Lasia Clarendon. And I just feel like today is the day to do that. And she was able to kind of adjust on the fly. But it was we just adapted as we went.
Jenna, for you, what was the hardest part about being in the bubble?
I think probably the mental toll that no one really expected, because like it was some sense of normalcy, right? Because like our whole entire world stopped with everyone else's. Like we travel and meet people and go to places that we would never be. And so I was just yearning so much to connect with human beings. And then so when this opportunity came, I was like, absolutely. Before they could even finish their question, I was like, yeah, I'm going. No question about that. But when you get there, and then like we actually had to be like in real quarantine. Like we were in fake quarantine if we're allowed to go outside for a run. But like there was a part in time when we were at a second offsite hotel before we were allowed in the bubble where your meals were delivered to your hotel room. You were not allowed to leave. The only time you could leave the hotel was to go for testing for 15 minutes a day. And that's when I'd be like, it was just myself, our DP and our audio techs. I'd be like, Josh, Morgan, what's up, friends? And seeing each other. And I remember running like 3 miles in my hotel room, just back and forth from my door to the window, just to try to like keep my sanity. And it was hard to be in like a real quarantine. And I think just the mental toll of not being able to do the normal things that you like to do, and then also not being able to have that support system that you're so used to at any moment's time of like getting in your car and going to see your parents or your niece and nephew. That was taken away. And like, thank God for FaceTime. But the sad thing about FaceTime sometimes is like when you hang up and then that everyone's still together and you're now by yourself. So I think just the mental toll of being away from people for that long, and then also not knowing how long it was going to be, that was tough. But then again, like kudos, like Lauren, I was always able to call her and she became my family very quickly in those moments.
That's awesome.
Lauren, speaking of the mental toughness, and how challenging was it to blend Breonna Taylor's story into this and go through that footage all the time? And I don't want to say relive it, but like just constantly have to be thinking about it. And how hard was that for you, for both of you? But Lauren, how hard was that for you? I'll start with you.
I think it was really hard. I think when you ask that question, it's like, it's two-part. I think what I feel is, yes, it was exhausting. Like Jenna's going to speak about her exhaustion being there and going through it with these women and experiencing it firsthand, looking at it and hearing about it and us talking about it every day. And it was so much ingrained in everything that they were doing and experiencing. But at the same time, you mentioned Breonna, that in specific, I think was important to see every day, and to talk about every day, because I think we're inundated with this. We're seeing it, and you don't want to become detached from it because you're building up this wall of like another horrific event that's gone viral that we're now seeing unfold in real time in front of us. And I don't ever want that to become normal. And in a way, I think because Jenna and I had to unpack it, every day we would have conversations just about what we were feeling. And especially after Jacob Blake, I mean, that was like, it went from 0 to 60. It was like, we knew that was a huge part of the story. We were talking about the storylines. We were talking about Breonna and her mother, Miss Palmer, and how to tell that part of the story. But then Jacob Blake happens and you're watching that video and you're dealing with the emotions of everything that Jenna and the crew experienced with. I mean, it was exhausting, but I really think, AJ, it was important because I was able to have an experience and a perspective that humanized it in a way that it wasn't just part of, Jenna and I say it all the time, just part of the news cycle. We were able to really dig and drill down into the issues, into how it impacts people, how it impacts us, the times that we would just sit and cry together. I mean, that was real. We still do it. We still are talking about it. So yes, to answer your question, it was very difficult, but also I feel fortunate that we were able to dig as deep as we were able to go. In a way, it was cathartic, I think. Yeah.
You guys did a great job with it. Jen, I'm going to pivot my question a little bit for you, but walk me into that day of the verdict. How did you get that story? How were you able to get her to share that moment with you as it happened?
Once we got back from the 62 days of me in the bubble, 52 days of shooting, and we're in this Zoom meeting with films and feature unit people, and we're all used to what sports access is, right? We're used to like the locker room talk and practice and rehab and all that. But I think with 144, it was the unique access of the vulnerability that these athletes gave us, and that trust that they instilled in us. And that's not something that we were going to take lightly. And it was very important that if they were going to share their soul and bare their heart with us, our goal the entire time was to make sure that we portrayed them accurately and who they are, and not sugarcoat it and not water it down. And even though it's difficult sometimes. So with Alicia Clark, we had an interview before and we had connected, and we were living, breathing, eating, working where we were sleeping. There was no clocking out. And I think that actually helped because we were part of this community. There was this unspoken bond of all these people. It's a finite amount of people that know what it truly is to live in a bubble, because I'm 10 months removed and I'm still trying to not 10 months, but I'm still trying to figure out how to explain what it really was. But then I talked to Natalie Achanwa, and it's like, we get it. There's friends I met in the bubble that's like, can we believe we even did this? So with AC, we were just kind of sitting outside the Storm gym, and I see her on her phone, and I knew the verdict was coming down. I had sent a couple of text messages to teams. Hey, can I come to someone's villa, like, are you guys going to talk about a practice? What can I do? And like, their job is to be professional athletes. So a lot of it was like, today's practice, we'll talk about it later. I'm like, I get it. But AC's walking up and she's on her cell phone and she's watching. I'm like, are you watching the verdict? And she's like, mm-hmm. I'm like, can we film you? She's like, absolutely. And then they kind of unfolded and that's just like the perfect example of everything was going on with the women, even when they were on the court. There was no separating anything of the troubles of what the world was, even though they were safe. They couldn't escape from the realities of what was going outside. And, that happened very organically and very natural. And, I think like that disdain you see of like when she hears like no officers are going to be charged and she just kind of like, all right, I'm done, like over it. That was real. And that was kind of like what everyone felt. And so we quickly learned that this was so much deeper than like a hashtag or just an initiative. Like these women genuinely saw themselves in them and Breonna Taylor. And I think it was important for them just to be vulnerable with that and show that with us. And that was just that scene. It's hard. And then we get Miss Palmer afterwards and just like that juxtaposition of in the bubble of seeing them see it and then hearing what these women have done for Miss Palmer. They've given her any little sense of hope. And to be able to continue was just, it's beautifully heartbreaking, but also just reminds you that there's still hope.
It was a very emotional experience, the film itself, just watching it. One scene that stood out to me was Tiana Hawkins from the Atlanta Dream was upset and teary-eyed after the Jacob Blake shooting, and her son was asking her what was wrong. And I think it was her and her fiance told him, it's not you, it's not you. And that really touched me as a parent. Because last year, my daughters were 5 and 7, and starting with, the Kobe Bryant tragedy, which was 15 minutes from my house, to the pandemic, to George Floyd murder, I had the same experience. I couldn't really explain to them what was really going on, and it wasn't them. It wasn't their, it wasn't about them. So I guess my question to you, Jenna, is those moments, how did you hold it together, and what was probably the most emotional moment for you?
I'm not very good at holding my emotions back. I like to feel the feels and, like I wear everything on my face. So even through a mask, I think it was very obvious of how I was feeling. So that was a very chaotic day. And that was just, we're just one camera. It's just, Josh and Morgan and I trying to pivot of all these intimate conversations. And then we're walking in the back and then we see just the family together. And that represents so much, right? Like motherhood in the bubble during this time of social unrest. She's a professional athlete. That's unique to the league of it all. We didn't know what the sound was until we got back. But then Morgan, our audio tech, was like, you need to hear this the second that we get back to our hotel rooms. You need to hear this. And then we instantly cried, all of us. I just got emotional of it and knew that that was like such an important scene to be featured in the film because it's a teaching moment, and it's a teaching moment that not everyone has to do. And that's not okay. And just because it may not be your reality doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. From the get-go, like Lauren and I never wanted this to be preachy. We never wanted it to be like, these are angry women and you need to listen to what they're saying. It's, these are true amazing superheroes walking around and they're role models for men, women, and children. And we are going to show you and hopefully teach you something, but entertain you first and then give you that like, holy crap, this is what's happening moment. That moment has been for Lauren and I mean, we still get emotional about that. Even if you talking about it, I'm just like biting back tears of it because it's one of those things that's just like, wow, like we need to do better. We just need to do better.
I'm not a very emotional person and in real life, but sometimes when I watch things, I get emotional. And that scene definitely I was like,
yeah,
because it really touched me as a parent because I couldn't express myself like that, just, with other people.
Right.
We talk about it, but not seeing it like that.
Yeah.
In real life.
Just knowing that like, he's too young, but he's not too young, like he's going to have to know soon. And that's just heartbreaking. And, and then another scene where like I instantly had to call Lauren and be like, I just needed a minute to talk with you. Like there's a AC in the doc said, like, you see a group of collective women saying like, we need a minute. There's so many times like Lauren and I've been like, we need a minute and just like talk about it. Was with Natalie Achanwa when she was having breakfast and the Ring doorbell story, like we didn't go looking for that. Natalie, I just gosh, she is gospel and she's therapy in all one of like, and when she talks, you listen. And, you know, we just were talking about her leaving the bubble and her fears. And she just shared that very personal story. And when I had talked to these women, I had said, like, I think the way to make this matter is to really make it as personal and as you can feel comfortable about it, because I think that's what's going to make people care. Like, Breonna Taylor is not just this face of a woman. You know, she was a paramedic, she was a daughter, she was bossy, she was sassy. Like, these are the things that we should know about these people. And so when she told us that was another moment of just like, oh my God, Lauren, like, this is so much bigger than what we ever imagined and just so important. And it was hard, but it was just like Lo said earlier, it was important to tell those stories and hopefully make some change in the world.
One moment that those two I wanted to ask you about, but Lauren, I want to ask you about the meeting, the 144 players in the players only meeting. And when you watched that back and saw that, for me, everyone, Courtney Williams stood out, but everyone just being so raw and emotional. And it could tell that you guys just sat in the back and just let it all happen. You didn't try to go zoom in on people's faces. You just let it breathe and happen. But it was so powerful and emotional. Lauren, for you, what were you thinking as you went through and saw all of this and just was a part of it? What was that like for you?
It was so interesting because Jenna, after that meeting took place, and she, you know, we talked before the meeting, like we were in communication that day as things were unfolding. And she was trying to explain to me what had taken place. And I don't even think I could have fathomed from that conversation even until I actually laid my eyes on it and saw it. And it was just like you described, AJ. I mean, it was raw, but what I was blown away by so much was just how just strong and smart these women are. Like, it was like getting a meeting of the minds together in a way that, like, the dialogue and the discussion was so, they get, I don't know if this is censored, but they get shit done. And like, that's what, like, I love about women, like, and strong women and Black women, like we're coming together and we're going to figure this out. And like, that just resonated with me. As soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, they are going to get through this. They are going to solve these problems. I love those shots of like Nneka and Laysia and Natalie, up at the front. They've got the laptops out. They were going to solve the problems of the world if they could have done it. That was what was happening in that room. And I know Jenna experienced it firsthand, but it was so like empowering to watch because I just felt proud of them, and I'm like, yes, like this is what we need to show people. Like, and nothing against, you know, the men of the NBA. I know they could have come together in a room and there would have been great dialogue, but I just felt like there was a moment of just progress forward where everyone was united, even though they had differences of opinion. You mentioned Courtney. They didn't all agree that they could agree to disagree on some things, but they agreed that they were going to move forward together. And that's hard to do with 144 different people from different walks of life with different experiences. So yeah, I'm going to let Jenna, I mean, just amazing.
It was just beyond historic, right? Like, when is that ever going to happen? This whole, even them dedicating their season to social injustice and Breonna Taylor would have looked different if they're in 12 different markets. You know, there's such strength in numbers, and the fact that they felt comfortable, like Courtney, you know, doesn't hold anything back. And the fact that she felt comfortable being true to herself and knowing that, like, she probably wasn't the only one saying that, but like that she had that space to be able to feel to do that. And then, you know, everyone listening to each other, because that meeting, gosh, hour and a half, 2 hours. And so like whittling that down was like so hard to do because it just was like, you couldn't miss television. And I think, like Lauren mentioned it was always about the 144. It always went back to the 144 and just the strength and numbers that they were able to show. And even, you know, just knowing that whatever they're going to do, they're going to move forward and united was something that I think is just so special to the league that I don't know if we'd ever see it, because these women depend on each other. These women play because they love to play. They're not getting the crazy money and contracts that the NBA players do. So there is that love of the game that's so innate in them that I think just makes it so much more impactful of like, they lose their platform if they don't play. And that's what they came here to do. And so, you know, at that moment, we were supposed to leave that Monday after that happened. And then that was a huge pivot of like, we can't go because what's going to happen? They may not play again. That we may be capturing the end of the league as we know it. And we need to stay here, whatever is going to happen. And I think like that also was a double down of you're seeing everyone around and you're waving at people because like you have this mask on. So I'm like trying my best to like give the Tyra eyes of like saying hello and connecting with people. And then like people are like, you're still here? I'm like, yeah, I'm staying to the end. They're like, all right, bet. Cool. All right. You're in this with us. Like, you know what's going on. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in here.
In that scene as well, I'm a big fan of Sue Bird's. And she reiterated, we're 144 women. We're 144 women. And I could just think titles usually come from a soundbite, or whatever. Did 144 kind of come from that scene, or did it come from somewhere else?
It came from a meeting with Laura and I, Sinead McKay, and her agent, Allison Gaylor. And, we were talking about like, we have all these characters, but like, we can't really, we don't have the time to really expand them the way that we want, but we want every character that we presented to kind of represent the whole, right? Like all together type of would be the 144. And so we were trying to think of like, what is something that is catchy? Is it like respect? Is it we matter? But like, oh, is that going to turn people off? And like, what is their number? And then Allison Gaylor just said, how about 144? And we all were like, oh.
There you go.
Yeah. It was that aha moment. We were like, that's it. It was like all four of us were like, yes, that's it.
And then we went back to the transcripts and we're like, oh, 144 was mentioned a lot. So let's pepper this in little spots just to remind people.
Speaking of the transcripts, Lauren, we all know, and you talked about how you like to interview and get a lot of material. What hit the cutting room floor that you were just like, and Jenna, I'm coming to you for this too, but what was there anything that hit the cutting room floor that you're like, because I know you're limited to 77 minutes. So it's like, what would you have liked to include that you weren't able to include? We dig in on Beyond the Lens. We get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, you want to get in there. I think, there honestly wasn't too much. Like I do think there are some things on the cutting room floor. Jen and I know what they are, but they're like, we honestly I think we were able to, in small ways, get a cross section of everything in. There was one, Natasha Cloud, who opted out of the season. We had shot with her for 3 shoots, and she went to the March on Washington. She was working with Philly schools and, to get laptops for students during COVID, so that they could actually continue their education. She was still working out, she was talking about, we were driving and we got, a crew, and they were driving with her through her neighborhood and talking about the issues that are, plaguing the Black community and the things that she, really was passionate about and why she made her decision not to play this season, with it just, that was something that we felt like, are we doing the right thing? Like, should we be fighting harder for this? Because it is important. It's part of the experience. But ultimately, we had to try to think like, if we are turning this lens and it's going to be truly the bubble and what took place inside the bubble and that experience of those who chose to be there. There was an argument on both sides, but unfortunately it became bonus content. But it was a tough decision. That one still hurts because I love her story. I think it's important, to see the other side of the coin.
Jen, I'm gonna get to you, but I think, Lauren, just to follow up on what you say, I didn't know a lot of these players, but you guys introduced them to me. And so I think that's something that's important that the WNBA needs to continue to do, is like expose a lot of these players so you get to know their stories. And so, Jenna, I'll pose that same question to you. But for me, that was just my experience. I'm like, man, Natalie's great, Courtney, like all these people, and I'm Googling them and following them on Twitter. I didn't know who they were, but you guys did a good job of sharing their stories.
Yeah, that was our goal. We wanted people to like look for more and like, oh, like, who is Dearica Hamby? I want to know more about her. Or like, okay, Steph Dolson, just any little thing that we can that's like, maybe not the household names, but like a way to grow the league. Or like Kennedy Carter, she's the up and coming baller in the league in her sophomore year. Like, she's going to be a face of it. And like, we like teased her a little bit. I think probably just like the length of some stuff, we would have loved to like make some more room and show that. And I think what was one? There was a scene, Katie Lou Samuelson was very gracious. They let us film a mental health session that she was in, which is just like you hear athletes talking about it. And then to actually like be in a therapy session with her was very telling and very open. And, we ran into some HIPAA violations with that one. So we weren't really able to share that. But, I just think like that was one that really like stands out. And they're such great people. And even just maybe showing like, we try to balance off that like there were some low lows and there's some high highs. And at the end of the day, like you still found a reason to smile. And so like, like they're funny. They're all hilarious. And so like, maybe like if we had a little bit more time, maybe showing more extended scenes of like dinner or, just them being teammates together that was off the court.
I don't want to harp on the ones that cut out. I just had to ask that question because I thought one that you included the last one I want to mention is just the Asia MVP. I thought that was just organic and it was real. And did you sit her down right after that? Because it seemed like it was a similar setup. So I was just curious how that whole thing transpired.
Yeah, so I'd obviously wanted to talk to Asia Wilson, working with the Las Vegas Aces organization of setting time for it. And then I get an email that's from their PR. His nickname's Jiggy. And so Jiggy's like, hey, can you come downstairs? I like want to talk to you about Asia. I'm like, okay, and go downstairs. And he's like, okay, so you're sworn to secrecy. She won MVP. We need to get her in this room. Can you do your interview tomorrow at 11 a.m.? I'm like, yep. Certainly, like I will be the cover-up story for you, no problem. And like, oh, I need an hour to entertain her. Yeah, I could do that. That's fine. And then so, we're wrapping up the interview, and then I'm like, Asia, like, can we just do a couple more portrait shots? Like, I just think like, your pearls are great, and like, there's kind of room for story more about her that we didn't get into. And she was genuinely like so surprised, like she had no idea because like we had the mic on her still. And then at one point she turns to me, she's like, did you know? I'm like, I don't know. She's like, that's why I have the mic on me still. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, it happened so great. And then like, what I love about that scene, like Lauren and I talk about like when her mom screams, like that is our moms. That is our moms. Like I literally like sent a video to Lauren of my mom doing that one time when like I surprised her flying home. And it's just so like, like it was a good reminder of like how you're still able to connect with people through technology and like still celebrate those. And, I remember like, I think I read like Asia about that scene. She'd done an interview and she's like, that was the first time I saw that. And like, she's like, I blacked out. I didn't know what was going on. So like, that just made it even more special to like give her that, like, and it was just so organic. She had no idea that it was coming. So yeah, that was a fun one.
Well done.
It's nice when PR guys can use us as the cover up.
Sure.
And not just say, no, you got 15 minutes. You have 15 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Lauren, when was the first time you saw any of the footage?
I mean, it was really Jenna was sending me some, like just texting me some little, like a couple of things that they were looking at. But really, I didn't see anything until very towards the end of the process. Really, you sent me like that first drive, Jenna. That wasn't that long before you actually left. Because like we did have a plan of like, we thought maybe they would be coming back out and then going back in. So that was before Jacob Blake happened. So like, I always had this expectation she was going to come out and she'd ship some drives and we'd like go through stuff for a few days, regroup, and then come back, quarantine. We could do some more viewing and screening during quarantine. None of that happened. So it really was like, it was like Christmas when we had our editor, he put everything on Vimeo for us and like just full scenes. So like, it was like hours and hours just like going through, and I had heard everything. Like I knew, and Jenna kept detailed logs of everything every day. And we talked every day, but seeing it come to life when I was like, oh, that's Kennedy Card. Like it just, it hits different when you're able to really experience the characters and see them. And
Absolutely.
it was great. It was great to be able to go through all that, but it was a lot. It was a lot of content. I mean, almost 200 hours of, right? 180 hours or something of.
And And you have to look at all of it. There's no way you can do this without looking at all of it. Thankfully we had support of PAs to help us log, but you got to know where it's all lives to really make those moments shine.
Jen, I wanted to ask you, how long did it take you to recover from being in the bubble? And what was the first thing you did when you got home that you missed the most besides sleep?
I know. I'm like, what did I do? Because I kind of was like, I'll take the weekend off. And then Monday, I'm back to logging. So I think I flew home to California because at the time I wasn't living here, but thankfully I'm here now, which has been really great. And I went to the beach, that is just like my place to go of just like reflection. It gives you the therapy that you need that you don't even know what you need. And it just kind of like speaks to you. So I think like just going to the beach, listening to the waves crash, my toes in the sand, like listening to some music. I think that was just kind of just like that, like my Shawshank moment of like, I'm free.
For me, when our season for the Miami Heat ended October 15th, didn't expect to go to the finals. It was great. We got there. We were able to exhale. For you guys, you finished the season and you're just getting started, right? You got all of that footage. You're working towards this timeline. Lauren, walk me through that process. You guys mentioned Zoom a couple times. Like, what was that like? How did you guys balance everything? What did you do?
That's such a great question because it really was different because of COVID. I mean, this was such a non-traditional workflow for a piece with this deadline and with this amount of content and length, right? We did it entirely remotely, virtually, which is just so hard. So yeah, I mean, we relied on Zoom. Our editor, I had a relationship with him. I've done many stories with him. Jenna developed a relationship with him. We felt very confident, but it was really like we would get on the phone, we would talk a little bit on Zoom about different scenes, and then we would let him go. And he would spend, 5-6 hours building a scene. And then he would send that scene to us, and Jenna and I would watch it. And then we'd get on the phone and we would talk through it. And we would say the things that, okay, we really love this, but we could be a little tighter here. And so we really went scene by scene. And, Jason was building, and then we were responding, and then we would give him feedback, and then we would kind of all come together. And then once we got into really the fine cut, we were on Zoom. We had another editor, Michael Sanabria. So we had Jason Sanchez and Michael. We had 2 Zooms set up each day. So because of the bi-coastal, I'd be up early with Michael. He's in Virginia. Jason and Jenna are in LA. So we would have a late Zoom that would go sometimes until, 2, 3 Eastern AM. Sometimes we'd both be on both. Sometimes we'd be coming in and out. I mean, we did that for how many weeks, Jenna? 3 or 4 weeks of double Zooms every day for 16 hours of.
Yeah, there was always an edit. There was always an edit Zoom to be on towards the end. Gosh, Lo. And I think it was the last 8 weeks, it was like that of us just really fine tuning it. And then, because it's also we kind of put it together as this puzzle. We're we know we like this scene. We don't know where it's going to go yet, but let's cut it. And then we kind of worked backwards in that way, which I kind of like to do that. It's a little maybe more chaotic, but then it just lets the scenes really speak for themselves and come through. And credit to Jason, we struggled with that Breonna Taylor moment of in the first opening scenes before they dedicate the season. I found this footage of this home video of Breonna Taylor. I had never seen it. And then we're how can we, what can we do to this? And we tell Jason our idea, and he just blew it out of the water. He just took it to a level that we could have never even imagined. And I remember calling Lauren, and I was girl, and she's I know. And we're just crying of how the hell did he do that? You see the women in them, the imagery of how the pace of it all, it represented her in a way that we had never seen, and that she deserved the entire time. And that little bit of storytelling that he was able to do was just an incredible piece of work.
Yeah, he did that throughout. That was something, it was total trust from Jenna and I with Jason. And I don't think we could have done that without that synergy. We had very similar, many, many, many conversations. Jason felt just as passionately about all of these issues, topics, the women, their stories, how we were going to present it. So when I say he would go and build a scene, he was building this, like he was feeling it, and he was channeling everything that he knew that we, like our collective vision. It was very much like, it wasn't just a technical skill, it was his heart, like he would feel it. And he said a lot of times he had to walk away. There were times that he was like, I can't, this is bringing me down because I'm angry. Like he was getting angry going through, seeing what these women were experiencing and knowing that, there was no justice and there was no resolution, and that was hard for him. So we knew, like, you're on the same page with us, we feel the same way. So we were really fortunate.
It's a beautiful feeling when you can watch a cut and be blown away by the editor. So congratulations to Jason Sanchez Rosa, I believe is his name, right? Okay. Hopefully I didn't butcher that, but Jason, fantastic job. One of the great editors out there. Josh Smith, one of the best DPs in the industry, did a fantastic job.
Yeah, that's all one camera. Like, I think we forget that because it doesn't look like it, right? Like, he's a wizard. He's what he was able to accomplish in there, I don't think could have been replicated. So it was very special to have him on that.
144, what can we say? I mean, it was an awesome documentary. Everyone should check it out. It's on ESPN Plus now, and I think the award season next year could be bountiful for you ladies.
Yeah, we want to go to the Emmys? Should we all go together?
No, I'm happy to go.
I won't be there, but if you want to take me, you can take me. Unless something changes drastically this year. Want to get into Act 3, which is just some quick hitters. Doesn't have to be a deep dive. First question is to Lauren. For a young woman who wants to be the next Lauren or Jenna, what advice would you give them?
Gosh, quick hitters. We can't do anything quick. This is not designed for us.
This is the long ball. These are long balls.
You're not alone. We say quick hitters and they all take a little while. You're fine. Go ahead. Give us your.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's the little things that matter. Like, I don't think that you can skip steps. If you want to be in this position to do long format storytelling, you have to know and be able to do every job that exists in what makes that film or that project come together. I just can't stress that enough. Like, the understanding of the detail and attention to detail is, I guess you just can't skip steps in this process. You just have to be willing to put in the time and just let the foundation develop and let it grow. Like, plant the seed and let it grow, but you have to be patient, I guess. And
great advice. You have to put the work in. You have to put the work in, no doubt.
Yes. Yeah.
How about you, Jenna? What would be one piece of advice to a young woman who wants to be the next great producer at ESPN?
Trust yourself. Like you being you is it's not your superhero power, right? Like, know what you're great at, know what you can contribute to a project, know how you can make your mark on something and make it special, and trusting in that.
My question is for both of you. Lauren, I don't know the process at ESPN, but I want to ask you what's next. And so does that get assigned to you? Do you get to go seek what's next? Like, how does that process work?
It is a combination. There is definitely like a steady flow of, assignments that are waiting, to be assigned, like that, we're just trying to work with schedules. So there's definitely a mix of things that need to be done. And then really, the world is your oyster when it comes to story ideas. Like, if you pitch it and you can get it greenlit, that opportunity is always there. So it really truly is a combination of how many stories, are you driving and pitching yourself, and those passion projects that you try to develop, and, you're chipping away at something while you're maybe on another assignment. So it is it's a mix. I can't say it's like 50-50. It really depends who you are and how much you're pitching. Yeah, that's the answer for me.
Well, no, the answer is what is next for you, though. I'm trying to get what are you working on? If you will share with
me. We want to go to the
Emmys.
I
thought you meant like, God.
No, I did that too. But this was a loaded question, Lauren. I wanted to get to, if you could share it, what are you working on next?
So long term, there's, we're coming up on the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And we're thinking about a big kind of scale project that I'll hopefully be in a position to, whether it's producing or managing that, for our company. And then in the immediate future, I am, currently doing a piece about a majority owner, the first African-American majority owner in professional baseball for the Atlantic League. So that's where I just got off a plane from opening day, which was yesterday in Gastonia, North Carolina. So that's right now just a story about an incredible real estate, commercial real estate developer, self-made, and Magic Johnson came out and threw out the first pitch and is doing business, came all the way out to Gastonia to meet Brandon. It was just really special to see, in ownership. He's not a former athlete. He's an owner. Like, he's a businessman. He's a multimillionaire. He's affecting people and inspiring people. I'm inspired by him. I'm like trying to run business plans by, so that's what I'm doing right now. So another kind of, and that was something, I pitched. It was something that came to me through a conversation and a contact that I have that knew the story. And we talked about it and I put together a plan. So that's a little bit of a passion project. And then, there's always the things that you just need to do. So, yeah.
Jenna, for you?
Yeah. I've been told short term of taking some time off, which I'm struggling so hard with because we just were running 100 miles an hour and now it just stops. And this is what am I supposed to do? But long term, the 50th anniversary of Title IX will be in June of 2022. So I will be doing a 1-hour special show about that in regards to the women of the ACC conference. And so that, can kind of go in any way that I want it to go in, which is exciting and fun. So, digging into the way of doing that story and the format of what I want to do. And then a short-term, long-term one is figuring out a way for Lauren and I to collab and do more things together.
Hey, well, I have some ideas for you because I think you need to do an Atlanta Dream story. I want to see it. Oh my
gosh, yes.
There's so many layers to that
I've already pitched that, AJ. I've pitched that. You know that already.
That's a 30 for 30.
Yeah.
Oh, no question. Yeah,
that's
there's
so good.
no question.
So good. Yeah.
Jen, I want to ask you, favorite sports documentary?
Oh, the two Escobars, I think. It's oldie but goodie, and just what I think I love about sports documentaries, the ones where you don't have to be a fan of the sport or know too much about it to really connect and resonate with it. And that one, I'm Hispanic, but I'm not a good Hispanic. I don't speak Spanish. So I was reading all of the subtitles the entire time, and I just was so invested in it. I still watch it all the time. And just the storytelling and it was majority of it was archival, and the way that they were able to do it was just magnificent. And then just the ties of, wherever there was the intersection of culture and real life and sports is just amazing. As you can tell from 144, it has so much power in it. So I think that one really just always sticks out.
Definitely. Lauren, how about you? Favorite sports doc?
Oh, gosh, this is the worst question. It's a great question, but it's I can't, now I'm thinking through, of course, because I'm a gearhead, Senna is coming to mind as just one that I just love the way it was done. And just some of the style choices of, not really showing many people on camera and just those kind of introspective, random B-roll shots that you're kind of hearing under testimony. I just love the kind of it was a little obscure in kind of the presentation, not obscure, but just unique and different, but it's an incredible story. So yeah, I can't choose one, but Senna is great. Yeah.
I love that you identify yourself as a gearhead because I'll be honest with you. I started paying much more attention with Bubba Wallace. I've gotten into it. I watch every week now. I pay attention.
Yep. But
I would not identify myself as a gearhead just yet, but it is a lot to learn. And I see they're doing a documentary about him and what's going on with 2311 Racing. So I'm excited to check that out whenever they finish.
Yeah. I interviewed him when he was 13. So I want to name that claim that when we were covering Bubba Wallace on NASCAR Now a long time ago. Yeah. And then we were fortunate to do that story as well with the Wendell Scott family about the history there and their relationship there. So incredible. Yeah.
Last question for me. Who would you guys like to hear on this pod? Who's someone that you would suggest, hey, you should check out and talk to this person as a guest that we can have on Beyond the Lens?
Jason Sanchez Roja and Josh Smith.
The editors. And the DP.
And the
That's a
DP.
good question. There you go.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's interesting because I do think you guys talked about the editor and the DP and how they helped you guys. And for us, it's important to recognize everybody beyond the lens. You know what I mean? Not just the director or the co-directors. And for you, I think that was interesting too. Seth and I were talking about this, how you guys were able to become co-directors on this. And I could see why, because you work together so well. But I don't see that a lot. Was there a challenge there? Or was there, hey, someone wanted to be, or this just kind of worked together, like you said earlier, Lauren, and it just worked?
Yeah, it just worked. Like, I mean, there were like times when we would like disagree, but it was never like anything bad. It was constructive and good. And like, it pushed us to think of things differently. Like, we were really good at pushing each other to look at it differently, to rethink of how we could do it. If like a scene was going to get cut for time, like, but we loved it, so how can we reshape it to get there? And you know, like, it was like growing up at ESPN, like Lauren was one of the people I like wanted to emulate, and then like now we're like able to work together, and you know, it's been special and it was good, and yeah, it probably couldn't have gone any better.
That's awesome. How about you, Lauren? Who should we bring on Beyond the Lens sports documentaries first season? Who should we bring on?
I'm thinking. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better. I definitely have some people in mind, but I'm not sure. I don't want to like leave anyone out, if that makes sense. Like, if I bring attention to someone, then it's like, you know, it becomes a little maybe I'm just thinking. I mean, maybe
maybe the director of Senna.
Yeah.
I think it's Asif Kapadia, if I'm not mistaken. His name's Asif Kapadia.
I have never pronounced it correctly, so I'm not going to even try. But if you know.
All right. Well, we won't offend anybody, but if you think of somebody, shoot us an email.
Absolutely.
All right, Jenna and Lauren, thank you so much for your time. An amazing documentary, 144. Everyone should see it. And we are wrapped.
We will be back next week with another great episode of Beyond the Lens, where we sit down with Dexton DeBore to talk about his docuseries Promised Land, chronicling the rise to stardom for Ja Morant. You won't want to miss it. And that's a wrap.
And I'd like to give a special thanks to our editors, Jacob Gorenberg and Andrew Holman, and our production assistant, Candace Evans.